how reparent. Oh, we're recording. Okay. And how reparenting work can shift you out of impatience and reactivity and allow you to be more present. And then last, ways that you can nurture your supportive inner parenting voice.
Great. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a little activity, and it's just really simple. Just going to invite you to put your hands on your heart, and if you can close your eyes, and just going to repeat within in your head 3 phrases. I am enough, I do enough, I have enough. And then just neutrally observe any feedback. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds or so, a minute to do that. And this can be a useful exercise to do because we can observe whether we hear anything back in relation to those phrases. So are we hearing nothing? And if so, that's quite normal. Are we hearing a critical voice that's going, no, you're not, that doesn't sound right? Or are you hearing like a cheerleader voice that's going, yeah, you do have enough, you are enough, like you have got enough? And it can just be a little way to kind of slightly tune in to what your inner voice is.
Right. And maybe there's one of those that has more of a reaction than the other. Like maybe I am enough lands good, lands well, but then it's like I have enough. It's like, ah, no, right? So that's interesting. Just, listen, because one of them might light up more than the other. So why does how we talk to ourselves matter? So essentially, like you have this person in your head all day, right? It's like you call it your ego, your personality, and it's been shaped by different experiences that you've had, different traumas, different joys, and sorrows, all of that shape us. And really, I mean, this has the ability to impact our mood and actions and behaviors. It has such great influence over us. So I really feel like it's really worth paying attention and understanding what is this voice, and can either make us quite miserable or really enhance our self-esteem and self-actualization. And we'll get into more of that in the presentation. The other reason why this is so important is that how we talk to our children becomes their inner voice. So like, just let that sink in for a second. And often how we talk to ourselves is like day to day comes out. Like that's how we then speak to others. So that's quite a big thing to swallow, right?
Yeah.
But has so much power behind it.
Yeah, and we're going to be thinking, some of you may be familiar with this this term reparenting, and this is a quote from Dr. Nicole LaPera, who does a lot of reparenting work in her stuff. She's the holistic psychologist is her brand. She says, ideally, our parents are 2 self-actualized people who allow their children to be seen and heard as the unique individual they are. The reality is that we live in a culture that does not teach conscious awareness, so most of us are born to unconscious parents. Unconscious parents are operating from a wounded space because of their unprocessed emotions. And often kind of with that comes low emotional intelligence, and reparenting is the act of giving yourself what you didn't receive as a child. And the way that your parents spoke to you, as Maria said, can inform your inner voice or the lack of it. as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is this you?
Yeah, so when we become aware of our inner voice and the ways that it may be supportive, um, or not so supportive, right? We can bump up against these limitations. I have a roadblock sign there because I feel like that really sums it up. And these patterns, such as wanting to fix other people, just feeling disconnected from ourselves, people pleasing, poor boundaries, resentment, shame, can't ask for what you need, you don't know what you need, feeling disoriented or numb, tendency to be self-critical, reactive, like easy to anger, or also repress your anger, always putting other people first, over giving, overworking. Um, those are some of the limitations that we face and that really really come up to the surface when we become parents. And a lot of these patterns were put down in childhood as coping mechanisms, as ways to feel safe. And so, yeah, they helped us maybe at one point, but maybe not so much now. So I'm curious in the chat if anyone feels like reading that list, you're like, oh yeah, that hits home. Yeah, that one. It doesn't need to be all of them that resonate, but if you feel called to put something in, it's always interesting to see what comes up for people. Probably mine is like, well, probably have quite a few, but like over giving or overworking, like as a way to ensure praise, like maybe as a child, like perfectionist tendency. We all have our special mix of ones.
Yeah, mine's definitely like disconnected from the self and like kind of
Yeah.
avoiding myself. So I'll just come off the
Yeah, that's
uncommit.
great. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, don't know what I need. Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah, self-critical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Self-critical perfectionism. Yeah.
And at different phases in parenting, I call them seasons. Like one of these might kind of come up more than another, depending on the vortex that you're currently in.
And, and it can be a vortex.
It is. I can't. Okay, there you go. Back to the slides. All right. So yeah, you can go to the next slide.
Yes.
So here's a really great. How we could do this exercise quick. Unpacking a common parenting scenario. So it can feel hard. Parenting can feel hard a lot of the time because we're having to constantly rehash, revisit, either consciously or unconsciously our past. So I think it's really important just to acknowledge that's what can make it feel so hard. And knowing that can really give us some relief. And we don't really need to look far to find a scenario that could agitate us. Here's one that gets to me. So the blue, it says, it's time to go, get your shoes on. Okay, like we've probably all said this, and this can go many different ways, but right, you say this to the kids keep doing what they're doing. Okay, then I have a thought, they're not listening to me. Okay, that's like on the 11th floor or something of the skyscraper. And then I have another thought that's like down a couple floors. No one ever listens to me. Then we're going to ride a little farther down, okay, down the skyscraper. And I have another thought. Nothing I say matters. Okay, we're headed to the basement. And then we're like, I don't matter. And then I'm blow up at my kids. Okay, so did you see that like little elevator down to the basement of shame and hopelessness? Like that might go different progressions for different people. And it's time to get your shoes on. Like that line might not bother one parent, but it might trigger this whole cascade for another person, depending on what your history and experiences are. So a parent coach is somebody that can really help you unpack like what are your unique triggers so that you spend less time of like being caught in this exhausting internal conflict, and kind of heal some of those at the root level so that when you ask your kids to go do something or whatever it is, it's like it's just that. It's that. You have a strategy, a verbal strategy, an emotional strategy for getting what you need and accomplished in your day instead of like riding this hellish elevator up and down.
And I love
All
the
right.
title of this, The Skyscraper of Hopelessness, Resentment and Shame, because I think we can all use this as like a visual for like, oh, I'm going down. And
Yeah,
really,
on the elevator.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Right. So okay, so that's what I said of uncovering your triggers. And so this is a quote by Jewel that I love that I use to tell myself all the time. If it's hysterical, it's historical. So like, did I just get hysterical about that thing? I'm a little like, it's probably something that comes from my past. So yeah, so like lightening your baggage load so that right, you're in the present moment, you're not somewhere in the past, that creates a lot of turbulence for you. And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of us are really used to like living in internal conflict.
Mm.
Like we just forget that that's like doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, that's massive.
And we're so used to that, like feeling, that we forget, oh well, like I could let go of some stuff,
Yeah.
be a lot more present, enjoy life a lot more. All right, you can move
You're
on.
getting some solidarity in the chat around the shoes. For me, it's socks.
Oh, good.
Some socks.
Yeah, it could have been 100,000 other statements, trust me, but that one gets the transition thing is hard. Yeah. All right. So we have a little exercise. So like, tune in. You can close your eyes if you would like or not, but in your mind's eye, recall something that recently uh, that you didn't handle so well. Like maybe some scenario with your kids, like we just went through the shoe thing. Yeah, I don't have to think very long about that. Something will just pop into your mind. Like, what happened? Just play through it for a moment. Give you like 10 seconds. And what is the internal voice saying about it? Who's saying it? Don't forget to breathe while you do it.
Oh.
All right.
Yeah, and like it can be really useful. The last question Maria asked, like, who is saying this? Because sometimes the loudest voice is not the most supportive voice. So who
It
is
might not be
saying this?
your own.
It might not be your own. So is it the voice of a scared child? Is it the voice of a critic, someone who's always guessing at you, telling you you're not enough? Is it a confused toddler? Um, is it an angry teenager, your mum, your dad, this little stress monster? Or is it no voice at all? And we're going to come on to that a little bit later. So if there is no voice, that's perfectly normal and valid as well. So if anyone feels compelled to share in the chat, it can be really useful to give that voice a name. Whose voice is it? Who's your voice, Maria, that comes in?
Um, it's probably, well, it can range, I think, depending on what the scenario is. I think the critic one comes up a lot for me. Like, why can't you just do this? Like, you're a parent coach. Like, you should be able to get your kids to get their shoes on all the time, like 100% of the time. Don't have a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think mine's like a like a toddler having a tantrum. Yeah.
I see a hand.
Hi, it's Beth.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask a little clarification. Are we meant to think about the voice that we were hearing at the time that that event was happening, or the voice that we hear when we kind of relive it in our heads now?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I
Yeah,
think, you know, it can be either, because you might, with the benefit of hindsight, be able to speak to yourself in a much more generous way than in the moment. So I probably say in the moment, what's the voice?
So this is a situation where one of my children had written something which was perfectly legible and lovely. Some of the letters were pointing the other way around. I have multiple inner voice personalities, and what came up there was the kind of the child who's scared to get things wrong.
Yeah.
And so I complimented her, but then nudged her to the letters that could have pointed in the other direction.
Yeah. So, I mean, it might be useful. Sometimes it can be useful to think about like what age that voice is. So if it's for you, like that child, you know, how old is that child? And that can be quite a useful tool. And yeah, so Maura said the critic comes up a lot for me, but another voice is that of a mother with tons of unmet needs of nourishment and support. Yeah, so we can have like a whole host of different voices going on in our heads, and one of the things is like kind of tuning the dials to which voices like are supportive to us, and let's crank up that dial. And it's not to completely, you know, turn off the volume of the other voices, because they can have uses, but it's just they're not leading the show. I think that's the
right.
Yeah.
So some tools for cultivating your supportive inner voice after you mess up. So in the moment, this is important, like there's in the moment and then there's like later, but in the moment, right after something happens, you can just ask yourself, like, what do I need now to soothe myself? And it can be really simple, like, I need some water. I need to go splash some water on my face. I need to drink some water. I need some little bite of protein, some food. I need some movement. Like maybe it's just like, oh God, that sucked. A hug, some quiet. Rest would be nice. Stepping outside, change of environment is huge. Like I know with kids, it can be like they're cranky. You're like, let's just go look at this tree outside. Like, and they're suddenly like, oh, I forget anything that ever happened to me that was unpleasant. But so we can kind of do that for ourselves too. Like, just open the door, look at the sky. It can do wonders. The change of environment. And then so I like to call this a self-compassion break. It's like a physical or mental pause. Like it doesn't have to be half an hour. It could be 30 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes, whatever, where you can just let your brain reset, like get out of that state. And then later you can follow it up with some verbal empathy, verbal self-empathy. We'll kind of get into what are some things you can say, because sometimes it is hard to even like think what to say. All right, you can go to the next slide.
And I think that thing of just saying to yourself, I am now going to give myself a self-compassion break, and labeling it, I think is really helpful as well. So we're going to think in this same scenario you had before that you identified, a tricky scenario. Just going to invite you to give yourself a little hug. So we're going to take our right hand and put it underneath our armpit, and our left hand going to put it on your other arm. And you can close your eyes. I'm going to read out some of these statements and just see which one lands with you, which one feels like it's the kind of thing a benevolent leader or a best friend voice would say to you. I'm going to maybe do it in the third person, third person. You are a good person. You learn from your mistakes. It's okay. That was really hard, and you could handle it. You're not alone. Others feel this way too. It's normal to feel upset. You'll get there. Everyone messes up sometimes. Even though you did XYZ, you are still worthy and lovable. And just see whether any of those particularly you enjoyed, and just, you know, it can be a really useful thing to just expand your repertoire of nice things to say to yourself, because often that's not something that we spend time thinking about, and really it should be something that we spend time thinking about. And all of these phrases are rooted in a growth mindset. So in this belief that you're fundamentally good and that you can change, whereas the often like that critic voice is the complete opposite. It's a shame voice, which is saying you are fundamentally flawed and you cannot change. Whereas a benevolent leader, you know, it's all about this growth. You can change, you can grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so good. I feel like having a stock phrase that you're just like, when this comes up, I can just say this to myself. Like it takes a lot of the mental fumbles out. At least that's for me. And there were definitely ones that like hit harder, like, this is hard, like you're not alone. Like that one really helps me. So yeah, so remembering that this kindness thing is actually a muscle. And a lot of us don't go to like PT for being nice to ourselves. So we need to like practice and like, is there one thing right now, if you're just tune in, that you feel good about in your parenting? And like actually offer yourself some acknowledgement as your best friend would. Like we spend a lot of time thinking about what's not working, but like, oh, here's one thing that is working. Like for me, it was deciding to get up 10 minutes earlier, and that 10 minutes really made a big difference, and I feel good about that. So yeah, say to yourself, good job, got this. The one that I use is, I see you working so hard to be better. Or you're doing your best, the best you can right now.
Yeah, I think for me that last one is the one that I use.
Yeah.
You're trying your hardest. I often say this to my kids, but really I'm not saying it to my kids, I'm saying it to myself. I'm trying my hardest and doing my best right now. And really I'm saying it to myself.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to just tell you a little story about myself, because sometimes I'll stop sharing. So before I was a parent coach, I used to be a media and film studies teacher, and I just really remember this moment where we were watching a film, and they had this bit of over-exaggerated inner dialogue where someone was talking to themselves in a film. Yeah, as that happens sometimes. And I said something like, oh, well, it's a bit over-exaggerated because people don't really speak to themselves like that. And it provoked a big debate in their class, because about 3/4 of the students were saying, yes, I speak to myself like that all the time, and I'm constantly speaking to myself. And another quarter of the class were like agreed that they didn't. And it was a real like wake-up call for me, because I was like, oh, hold on a sec. There are people who have this like supportive inner dialogue that I don't have, and I would quite like to have that. And also it kind of makes me think, oh, and I kind of see why I didn't. because, you know, my mum's quite emotionally avoidant and my dad's very emotionally passive. So it makes me think of, you know, in The Lion King, all seen The Lion King, where Simba is looking into the water and he hears the voice of Mufasa, right? And it's like all these like great words of wisdom. Well, I kind of think like, if I were to be doing that, if this was a movie of my life, the things that would be coming up for me are: don't work with cars and don't eat anything blue. And like, this would be like I'm just kind of like, I just don't have that sort of, I was just not really given that sort of like supportive inner champion voice of wisdom voice. And it's really, you know, it's not that my parents like were neglectful, they just couldn't offer me that with the skills that they had. And so yeah, I mentioned this because sometimes people can be like, well, I don't have a voice that's being mean to me, and I don't particularly have a voice that's critical or like mean to me. I just have an absence of a voice. It's like, had all these thoughts and then no you know, no talk with them, no being able to rationalize these thoughts. And really, like, for me, it's been a journey of practice. It's been a journey of slowing down and kind of honoring myself. I'll give you an example. Yesterday I had a bath, and then after my bath I went into the we've got a TV in our bedroom, and I don't think it's a good idea to have a TV in one's bedroom, because this kind of thing happens. My husband is watching All Quiet on the Western Front, that new movie that's out, and it's just like gunfire, like blood, like somebody's leg was like blown off, and I'm just kind of like, this is right before bed, and it's the kind of thing, my inner voice comes in now and it goes, being here in this space right now will not help you go to sleep. Walk away. And I listened to my inner voice and I did walk away. And I think that for me, sometimes we think of the inner voice as being like softly. I'll come on to that in a second. So the benevolent leader, this inner voice who's a benevolent leader, a kind parent leader, is rooted in this belief: I am inherently good. That is massive. I am inherently good. And actually, I'm just going to invite you all to just say that to yourself. I am inherently good. And trying my best with the tools, knowledge, and resources I have available. I love this quote from Maya Angelou. Do the best that you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Because it's just like, oh, okay, I'm inherently good. I'm inherently trying my best. And when I have more knowledge and more skills, and when I have my needs met, that is really crucial, I'll be able to do better. And I think that this is really interesting thing to think about, that compassion is not always softly. It's not always kind of like cozy. It can be quite, my inner voice really supports me, as in like saying, stop, that is not serving you right now. Stop, that is an unhealthy pattern, you don't need to do that. And just intrusive thoughts, a lot of parents have them. Intrusive thoughts, I mean, I basically used to have this horrific movie running through my head every night as I was going to sleep. Just horrendous intrusive thoughts, my children like dying in lots of horrific ways. And one thing that's really helped is my supportive, benevolent inner voice says to me, stop. I see why you're doing that. You're trying to keep yourself safe, but that is not keeping you safe. That is not helping you right now. That is an unhealthy pattern, and you don't need to do that. That's not going to help you go to sleep, and it's not going to keep your children safe. You can keep your children safe without those intrusive thoughts. And I still have those intrusive thoughts, but I'm able to make them go away much quicker.
Mhm.
And it can really help you with boundaries like that. This is not serving you right now. And it can stop you from self-sabotaging yourself. Because I was self-sabotaging myself so much. And things like sleep. I had this phrase like that sleep, what was it? Like sleep should be a sacred ritual. Now, I'm not quite there yet with sleep being a sacred ritual, but I used to treat my nervous system like someone who I hated, right? And that's self-sabotage. And actually now, like, my inner voice can come in and go, stop, that's not healthy for your nervous system right now. Stop, that's not helping you get sleep right now.
Mhm. Yeah, so right, just that what Emily was just saying about how she used to treat sleep or rest a certain way. That's like from an unconscious understanding of like, oh, sleep actually like does a lot of things that I really need, and become more aware, more conscious of how that can improve your life. So, right, becoming aware of how our own childhoods, our own stories or habits about ourselves affect our parenting and our inner voice. And, I feel like we were not put on this earth or made parents like to just repeat old um, patterns and injuries. And like my kids are like it's like my dojo. It's like they're like trainers for your soul. Like let's get this stuff like get out of there so like you can have a more joyful life, and they can progress and be who they're meant to be. So, and you can come back into harmony with yourself and your relations. So it's really, for me, this kind of thing of from unconscious to conscious is um, is like true freedom, like liberation, um, to um, to not have to believe everything and that you hear or that you tell yourself, and that you can like that you don't have to be so impacted by everything. You have more freedom to think and be and live how you want.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think in a way, like there's that thing about like when you're observing your inner voice, it's a good question to ask yourself, like, who is it that's observing? And often the answer is it's your truest, most authentic self that is in that place of observation. And that's the journey to being more
Yeah.
conscious, is tuning into that true, authentic self. So this is we're not going to do this now, but this is something that you can do when you come away from here. And this is really what we do in coaching, is this is the iceberg of actually that makes so much sense. So up at the top we've got your behaviors, your patterns, your inner voice, and down at the bottom of the iceberg, so that's what we can see and hear, and then at the bottom of the iceberg is all of the stuff that is going on underneath. And in coaching, what we do is we just connect a dot. In therapy, you might spend most of your time exploring under the iceberg. In coaching, we're going, oh, that's the dot, that's the dot, that's the dot. And that makes sense. And a lot of it is about connecting dots. So you see, actually, that makes a lot of sense. I understand that. I'm not inherently flawed. I'm an inherently good person. I just have certain behaviors because they've got some dots to link. And just for example, like I find with the clients I'm working with at the moment, sometimes just one thing, like one realization, clicks everything into place. So for example, like the sensory sensitivities, just having an awareness that somebody has sensory sensitivities to like loud sounds, for example, can be like, oh, actually, I'm just massively overstimulated in my parenting, and that is causing X, Y, Z, you know, whatever, right? And actually having that realization that, you know, it's not that I'm a bad person, and there's things I can do about the sensory sensitivities. For example, I'm planning a new kitchen, and I'm planning it with acoustics in mind, because acoustics in British houses are appalling. The sound just bounces all over the place, and that has impact. So one question to ask yourself, and if you could just pop this in the chat if you feel willing to, did your parents apologize to you? And did you feel forgiven when you made mistakes as a child? And the answer for me is no and no.
70s. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was the 70s. Yeah. And you know, often our parents, they were doing this, like not apologizing, not with bad intent. Sometimes their intention may have been good, as in like they kind of felt that if they were to apologize, then they would be like surrendering their authority. And that would be not the way a parent should be around a child. So, and sometimes it's also because of low emotional intelligence as well.
Yeah.
And the impact of this is if your parents didn't apologize, and if you didn't feel forgiven, well, then it makes complete sense that you might struggle to forgive yourself, because we learn by modeling. And if you've never been modeled forgiveness, of course, it's going to be quite tricky to forgive yourself when you make a mistake. And you are going to make mistakes because you're a human. And so I think apologizing requires self-forgiveness and courage. So apologizing to someone else takes a great deal of courage, because the thing is, to apologize to someone else, you have to take responsibility, and taking responsibility can be physically painful because it's an exercise and a conversation with shame, because it's like, oh, I did something wrong, oh, and I'm not fundamentally flawed, I'm actually okay, and I still did something wrong. And it's a difficult thing. So if we were never repaired with, it can be really hard to repair with ourselves.
Yeah, so just to, you know, on the tail end of that, that it's so important to honor your pain if you were not forgiven as a child. And it can be like small things or big things, maybe. But also understanding like what does forgiveness feel like in your body? So like that when you are forgiven for something, or you give that to somebody else, it's like you take it in like it's medicine, like it's something healing, because it is. And for me, what I notice in my body like is just that lightness. Like I'll suddenly feel this like, oh, like this like relief, like less baggage, less tension, and like especially in my chest. And we tend to hold like we do tend to hold grief in our chest, in that region. Yeah, so you know, just make note of that, sort of like a somatic literacy of where do you experience different emotions in your body.
I love that phrase, somatic literacy.
I just made that up, but
I love it.
That.
That's going to be the title of your book, Maria. I see it. Somatic literacy. I love that. And it really is that, like becoming like aware of where feelings and experiences land in your body, and where they live in your body, and where they stay in your body if you don't release them. Somatic literacy. That's it. Yeah.
Right. So forgiveness, when we offer it or receive it, we can step out of shame and you know, when we're living in shame, we're living in this kind of like tight paralysis, and this like sort of growth mindset that Emily was talking about, of we're all doing the best we can with the resources that we have. And that includes ourselves. And, you know, you can extend this like to your lineage, to your ancestors, your parents. Like, yeah, man, like my parents were like trying to do this stuff before the freaking internet. Like they didn't have access. There were like probably like 5 books about raising kids, like Dr. Sears and what, you know, like there just wasn't that knowledge built up out there. And certainly not information about like sensory issues or how the nervous system works. Like that just wasn't there for them. So I, you know, when I look at that, then I can understand, oh wow, like, yep, that gives me a like an expansive view instead of like living in a more closed-minded, like blame or shame type attitude.
Yeah.
So this is we're gonna follow up the class with a handout, and I think this is a good one to put on there, because you can kind of read it at your own pace. But what did you not get as a child that you needed, right? Like unconditional love, unconditional acceptance, to be seen for your truest self, to be understood. And those are kind of wrapped up in attunement, but space and autonomy, trust, validation of feelings, space holding, no fixing, privacy, support, encouragement, affection, physical touch, patience. Like that list is long and deep and wide.
Yeah.
And you may experience, like when you read these, like you may experience some sadness or anger that you didn't get what you needed. Or you might experience like great joy that you're able to give like a lot of these, a lot of the time to your kids. So like that can go either way, or both ways at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth just like letting that sink in, and you can unpack that more like in your own time or in your own journal or space. Yeah.
So Mario, which is it for you? I think for me, it's the unconditional acceptance, then to be seen for truest self. And if anyone wants to share in the chat anything that comes out today.
Kat wrote, it's like it's like a shopping list for the ideal parent. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning, like, you know, I don't think it's possible for any parent to do all of that all the time, but obviously we can,
Mhm.
you know, it is like a nice shopping list. Yeah, you're right.
Right. And we may be able to give ourselves some of these things like, I'm going to work on this year, like just validating my own feelings more and my children's more. Like, it's like you're not going to be able to do all of these at all the same time.
Yeah.
It's unrealistic. We only have so much bandwidth.
Yeah.
But like just being aware that this exists, like that's huge.
Yeah. So yes, Melina's saying attunement, validation of feelings, and space holding, no fixing, were what you needed. Yeah, seen
Right.
for truest self. Yeah.
And like, you know, you and your parent, like you may be able to meet a bunch of the time for your kids, but like as a child, and you maybe had like a bunch of these met a bunch of the time as a kid, but maybe there was one that was just like, chronically unmet. Like a bunch of them were met like pretty satisfactory, like 30% of the time, but there's like one where you had a parent that just like didn't like offer one of these, like so it became more chronic. So it's more like the chronic thing that builds up over time that can be helpful to remember.
Yeah.
All right.
No, just I do think like it's important to say if you did all of these 100% all of the time, your kid would never experience human, what it is to be human in a way. Like we need to muck up
Right.
a little bit as parents because,
Right.
you know, um, that's human. And we
That's
need
how
to
they're going to
teach,
become resilient too.
yeah, and we need to teach our children what it's like to be human. So you can have a guess as to who's who. But yeah, it's this is me with the teddy and big cheeks, very big cheeks. And yeah, do you want to talk about this, Maria, about the exercise to do with this?
Um,
On the
right.
next.
Can you actually go to the next slide? I forget what's on there. Right. So here's one exercise. This will be on the handout too, but pick a picture, find a picture of ages somewhere in the age between 2 and 12 and have a conversation with that child. It can be helpful for people to have a visual prompt, which is why we like put our pictures in there, but pick your own picture and check in with that little person. How's it going? How's it going for them? You can ask, who are you? What do you need right now? What do you love doing? What do you worry about? Um, and just like let's see what happens. This can be a great journal exercise. I have a different picture of myself, like right by my bedside table. So I turn out the light, or I turn on the light in the morning, and I see this little like face smiling at me. I'm like at my third birthday party, waiting for my friends to come in the sun. It like brings me a lot of joy. Another exercise can be like, what do you love doing between the age of 4 and 8 in terms of play? And it can be a great window into discovering like this part of yourself that's like not related to achievement or productivity. It's like, okay, okay, like age 6, like I loved beading. Like I could just like bead all day.
I thought you said
So like maybe
beating
that's
then.
something,
I
yeah,
was a
like
bit scared, Maria. Beading.
beading. Like I could like just sitting there and
Yeah.
now I understand the role of crafts in terms of your nervous system regulation. So it helps me understand, oh, like that's interesting. I enjoyed that activity. So I don't know, these are just little ways that you can interact with that little child inside.
I hadn't thought of that crafting is good for your nervous system.
Oh, we'll have a talk later.
Yeah, like that. And then I think yeah, we're going
I
to
think
talk.
we're close to time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we're just going to talk about some of the things that have helped us, and then if anyone else wants to put in the chat what has helped them with their inner voice, please do. So I start like a few things that have really helped. Yeah, I mentioned if you follow me on Instagram, like EFT tapping really helps me, and I know like that can be a few people I know that have done EFT tapping. It's just like, oh, I'm speaking to myself and in a nice way and acknowledging myself. And you can find, if you don't know what it is, you can find tons of EFT tapping scripts on YouTube, and it's just a kind of a lot of it's around acceptance. And I think the thing when you're tapping, it's like you're tapping on accepting yourself for all of your foibles, and it's just this thing of when you accept yourself, you don't have to fight with yourself so much. That's what I've really found. It's like I can just accept the voice of benevolent leadership because I just accept myself more. But I do have to say, like, for me, it's not like I'm like I have some perfect relationship. I really need like slowness and stillness and solitude. Otherwise I ignore my supportive inner voice. What about for you?
Yeah, I think also that's true for me, of needing to like be going a certain pace to be actually able to hear it. And I have a certain tendency to like just keep going, right? But that doesn't really, it's not really working. It's not really aligned with how I want to be living. So I have to kind of like work extra hard to slow down. Yeah, I guess I described another one that another exercise I really love, which just takes a moment where you envision your self as a child, any age, and you're like, what do you want to do today? Like a date with your little self. And it's like, I do this sometimes before bed, and I'll just imagine be like, oh, you want to go to the beach today? Let's go. Pack the car. Like, let's get going. And you just imagine it's like totally abundant, glorious, full, fun day just there. And I mean, it can take like 30 seconds, 5 minutes. It's a really neat exercise, and it's a really nice way to build that deep security and safety with yourself. So like when shit's moving around really fast and turbulence, emotional turbulence, you're like, I had my like that little person is like so happy they ate like 3 ice cream cones and went to the beach and went shopping. Like it can be, and it does, and it's like your imagination doesn't know what's real and not real. Like
Yeah.
this is like the biggest untapped power
Yeah.
that you have. Like your mind doesn't know that's not real. So you are like reshaping history, neural pathways. It's really huge. So I encourage you, like, have some fun. And it can be like anywhere. It can be anything, anywhere. It doesn't have to make sense. You're like, I want to do this, then I want to do this. Like, cool. Let's go.
I love that, and I think that's so great, going on a date with yourself, your kiddie self. So yeah. We're going to end with you guys sharing like what is your takeaway from this session. What are you going to try and do or to help cultivate your inner voice? But just to say, Maria and I, we're both parenting coaches, so work with people on 12 weeks, basically tuning in your intuition so that you can parent with sturdy confidence. So yeah,